Good morning. Welcome to Saturday Sampler. Great day here in the foothills. It's beautiful outside. I see Kristen's there. Yes, the birds are singing. We've had an abundance of birds this year. If you are on and ready to go, please pop in the chat box and let us know you're here. And also make sure that you ask any questions that you have as you were working on your paper piecing this week. If you ran into any questions or any problems, please let us know that too, because we're here to help if we can, as much as we can. I've been answering questions that you have emailed me. I have tried to make sure that I answered all the questions on the 3 places where you can go and ask those questions. And Margaret, hopefully Kristen has seen that. She's the one that works with that kind of thing. And I'm going to ask Kristen to put up a link today, a direct link for finding the patterns. That seems to be a big issue for everyone. And to go to the website, to go under Learn, Dee Saturday Sampler, and you have to also click on Patterns and Documents, and the patterns are there. So I'll ask her to try to do that today. And hello everyone. We got some people from just all over the place. Kyla, Gloria, Laverne, good morning, Bernadette. All right, Mississippi. My brother is coming to visit me for the first time from Mississippi. All right, I see that Kristen did put up that link. Thank you so much, Kristen, for doing that for people. So please go back if you still are struggling with that. Let's get started today on our block. We started with, getting things down, choosing colors, starting the thinking process of how you are going to finish this quilt. Because part of me says that we need to have a fairly clear idea, because you've got 5 patterns, and your end product does not have to use all 5 of those patterns. You can choose 1 or 2, 3, or all 5, and figure out a configuration for how you would like to finish them. If you need setting blocks, what you want to do with your border, because there's many things. And in the last class, I definitely will be talking about borders. But today we've got some, really strong angles in that block number 1. So we're still on block number 1, which is, we're going to talk about sewing in those curves and those very strong points in terms of the pattern itself. And then we'll move into pattern number 2 and get started with that today. So we've got a lot to accomplish. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to bring you down to my spot here. This is pattern number 1. And this, if you were to look at the quilt that's been shown on the quilt show, etc., and that I have been showing you as well. Let me see if I can bring that up real quick. Nope, that wasn't it. There it is. You're going to see how dramatic, especially when you use a darker color. The bottom right hand side is block number 1, and how dramatic those points can be. And so you might want to have a focal point in your quilt, and definitely this is a focal point block, and why I designed and included it in the 5. And so let's pop that out, and let's get rid of that and come back this way. All right, so again, the items that you need are your pattern printed off onto, I prefer Carol Doak paper, but whatever paper you have that you're using, feel free to do that. And some of you I know are using the poly stuff, which you can leave into your pattern, etc. A piece of junk mail, or I just use the cardboard that comes in my Carol Doak paper so that I can use that to bend my papers back. My pieces have been cut, and hopefully you remember, let me grab my ruler here behind me, that to determine what size, I measure, the width and the length, and this ruler won't give me the full length, and then I add a minimum of 1 inch. And when these spokes get really tough, or very sharp or very long, I will, because of the angles, I will even do a little bit more than 1 inch. I'd rather have the leftovers that I can put into another quilt, make new fabric from, etc. When you're looking at the pattern, I want to go over this because there was a number of questions. You're going to get 2 pages that look like this. And I copy ones that have these curves that I'm going to be, and I copy them or trace them onto freezer paper. And the reason I do that is because the freezer paper I can iron to the fabric and it stays put and I can cut it out. So that is why I use freezer paper for that. You can use pins, glue stick, whatever. I just happen to like the freezer paper, and I don't mind the minute or so that it takes for me to trace that. And you do have to trace the seam allowance in there. Make sure that you do put the seam allowance in. Then I will cut this out, and that is what we did last week. We made that curve with our fabrics and getting started in the whole process. Now, the top part of this is in 2 different pieces. And as I showed last week, the best way for me, at least, is that I cut them apart. And hopefully you can see that I have, cut along the edge and tape those together. I generally use masking tape, and I will tape it to the back, but I keep my sewing line clear so that I am not sewing through the tape, obviously, on that. Then as far as the sewing machine setting goes, I will set that to 2.0. Because for me, the 2.0 is, I learned from Alex a couple of weeks ago. It's been a while. She talked about her favorite, features of her machine. And one of those features was that excuse me, I was looking at my machine. One of the favorite features was that she had learned that sewing machines are set automatically to the for garment sewing. Excuse me, that totally escaped me, for garment sewing. And so, and 2.0 was a better one. And because I don't know if you have the same issue with your sewing that I do, and that is that when I am, at the end of it, when I start on that, I don't like to necessarily have that knot there, so I don't put that with my, my Bernina 770. So it will come undone on times if I'm messing with it too much. But I followed her advice and I put it down to 2.0. Great stitch, and it holds that in, and I like it so much better. And they generally tell you to, lower your stitch length for paper piecing because it helps to tear that paper better. I don't necessarily, need that because the Carol Doak paper tears so well. You can use the water brush, all of that. But I do appreciate having, some of that knowledge. So we're going to work on this pattern piece. I want to simply get started on this, and so that we can move ahead to sewing curves. And so again, my E's are the background pieces, the D's are the points. And let me just check the chat box before I move on. I don't want to miss questions and stuff because I know I have a tendency to do that. All right, I'm not seeing any of them right here. So to get started with paper piecing, you take your first piece of fabric and you're going to go to the back side of your paper. And what I really like about the Carol Doak paper is that it's see-through. And I don't have any problems seeing where I need to go. So I have cut my piece of cloth at least a good inch, and this angle makes a big difference when you're working at it. You could cut a large square and then cut that square in half diagonally. I'm just leaving it as a square because then I can use that at a later time. So I'm covering at least over that 1/2 inch at the and the first piece is the only piece in paper piecing that you have face up. A number of you kept talking about glue, so I want you to let you know that sometimes I can use glue too, and I do. I don't always like to because it sticks sometimes, and whatever. It's just a preference. It's not a big deal, but I'll use a little bit of the glue. Then you put, I don't trim it right now, I wait, and so I'm going to put the D piece over the top of that. Let me move this out of the way for right now. And I'm going to flip that back over, and this I want to make sure that I have that covering all parts of that, and I have at least a 1/4 inch, and I can see through my paper that I do have at least a 1/4 inch all the way through. All right, so I'm going to put that under the machine, and I start just a tad bit off of the paper. I know a number of you asked about that, that you had to start right at the edge. And my foot pedal is in a strange position. All right, now I'm going to take my junk mail and put that on that sewn line. I'm going to bring my paper back and use my 1/4 inch, or add a 1/4, not a 1/4 inch, but add a 1/4 ruler. Now you can do this with your regular ruler. It just makes life much easier when you have this little add a ruler, so that I have that 1/4 inch. Here in the pressing process, you can press with your fingers. I like it to be, crisp, and so I'll run my, iron down the side and press that seam down so it's nice and crisp on there. And then with my next piece, I am going to fold it back so I know where my 1/4 inch seam line is, And I leave a little bit of the black showing, at least half of it, so that when I fold it back, I've got and this helps me determine where my next piece is going to lay, and that will be an E piece. And I need my long one. I picked up my little one. And so this is going to come back and it'll cover all of that I need it to cover. And again, right sides together, making sure that you have your pieces, and you know, you can fiddle with it if you want to make sure that it's going to cover the entire point of that, and all of that will be good, hopefully. And then I'm coming back to my machine, and again, I want to get that crease in there nice and firmly. Fold that back. Now I have the small at a quarter ruler. They make them longer, but I've never felt that I needed to have it longer. I simply move it up and down, but they do make a long version of that. So E is there, and then my F is a nice long one. I might have missed a little bit on that corner. I think I did. I think I missed a little bit right here on the E. Oh, no, I didn't. You know what? What I did is I think I bended, cut my 1/4 inch at the wrong place. Okay, that happens. I'm glad it happened on screen. Hopefully you saw that that is something that could take place. And make sure everything is nice and flat. And then I just push it once a little bit because it pushes nice and easy. And then I can lay this piece and make sure that that definitely covers everything. Flip that over, go under. All right, my D is covered. I'm going to again trim off so that I have my 1/4 inch angle. And I can use those angles for another block as I work along here. And that is my bottom one. I do not have my piece. Ah! That's my pieces for that bottom part. Oh my. All right. Let me see if I can grab that. If you can hang on for just a second. I've got my short pieces there, but not my other long piece. Hopefully this one is the one. Yes, I think it's going to work. I have my pieces over on the other side. Alrighty. And this is where I, taped them together, and I left the masking tape off the where the two lines meet so that they wouldn't alrighty. And again, getting close. And then we'll do a curve. To show you how sewing those curves in. Someone asked the question that why don't I, use my paper for sewing my curves instead. It really is difficult, and I cut my pattern apart because the curves do not you can't really sew because it wouldn't have any give if you were to sew on the paper without cutting it apart and making and that, as you can see when I'm doing this, that sometimes it moves a little bit. And that's why glue, I'm sure, is a very good choice to put on there. A pin, something. I'm just sewing dangerously and going for it. Part of it is time. Some of it's laziness. If I'm being honest. Good. All these threads and stuff. All right, our last piece. I'm going to trim so I know where to lay it. So I bend that back, trim it. And I just slide that little ruler up. It slides along there quite well. Usually do not have much trouble with that at all. All right, and then I want put that there. I'll bring it back to the sewing machine. And I just hit the scissors, not smart. Now hit the scissors. Alrighty, we've got that pretty much cut. I did notice that I made a slight error here in my seam allowance, but I'm not going to worry about that right now because I do believe it's, I've got at least an 1/8 of an inch there so that I don't have to worry about that. And now I'm going to trim up my pattern at that 1/4 inch. You know, it's different when you're working on a small surface and you know that all these people are watching you. All right. Anywhere that I can do a straight seam with my ruler and cut it, I'm going to. The curve is going to be a little bit different story. And you know, you can use the scissors. That's what I believe as you know, through the years I've seen people do. They feel more comfortable with the scissors doing that. Again, I will use my rotary cutter and I will go around that seam. And it's not always 100% perfect, but it's fairly close to it. Now I want to talk just a little bit about this curve and the paper because I could take that paper off. And, you know, most of the time I prefer taking the paper off because I have a little bit more flexibility when I am, you know, pressing a curve. And because that's what I normally do, I am going to remove at least the paper around where the curve is for right now. And again, removing the paper, if you did not remember from last week, the Carol Doak paper, as you can see, you know, just tears off pretty easily. I really don't have much of a problem getting it off. You can use a water pen and put water along the edges. The other thing that I do that I like even more than the water is that I run my the back side of my seam ripper along that edge, and then that paper just, it's already torn and fallen off, and I can just rip it out of the way. But for right now, what I'm really trying to do is just give myself that curved angle and making sure that I have the flexibility to sew in my curve. And the first curve that gets sewn in is my C curve, and that's going to fit into there. And for those of you who may not have sewn in curves before, it looks like it's too big for it. It's not. It will fit into that and make that curve for us. Before I sew that, I want to go and question. In addition to the neutral background fabrics, are 1 or 2 fat 1/4 packs of abandon needed? I would say yes, because it's going to also depend on your design. and which blocks that you're going to use and which fabrics that you want to use. As I see my, packages here, I was sent 2 packages and then the background fabrics. I'm going to pretty much use those because I'm generous with my my patterns as I design them. Cutter on the curves, the small one, is easier to absolutely, Kyla, and thank you for putting that up there. I just didn't have it handy when I was cutting that. I even have one that goes on my my forefinger that I use for a lot of curved stuff. All right, we watch. Oh, Sherry, thank you for that. Some Tim Holtz fabrics in the store. So you can still order, some fabric from the quilt show if you haven't gotten your fabric yet. And I know some of you have asked that question or were disappointed that you did not have the fat quarter pen. All right, I think that was the only question. So now I'm going to just remove my freezer paper. And the first thing that I want to do is find the center of my arc. And so I just finger press it because I can see it there in that. And then I want to also find the center on this arc so that they can match up. And you can watch a lot of people do this, obviously, on Pinterest and other shows, and you may have done that already. And, each person has their, how they attack things a little bit differently. But I put a pin. I usually use 5 pins. Others will use 20. Others will use none. So I think it becomes a comfort thing. Then I go to the edge. And I pin so that fits right there into the edge of that. I go to the other side and do exactly the same thing. And then I usually, let this kind of find its way. It'll fit in there. I have sewn it, as you can see, that it more or less just fits right into the piece. And I'm going to drop another pin in the middle. This is my 5 pins, one on each side. And I'm doing the largest one first because it's going to be the easiest one. That's why I wanted to wait to do the points till this week. It's just a little bit larger curve. And then I'm going to drop that pin in here. All right. And let's go to the machine and sew that in. Pull my thread out, get that situated correctly, and on occasion I'll do what one is not supposed to do. I'll leave my pin in, but today I'm going to try to be a good girl and leave that out. Now when I work at this and go slow, it's almost like I'm sewing a straight line. And as you can see, I'm putting both my top and bottom piece right along my 1/4 inch seam, more or less, and sewing that because basically that's kind of what you're doing. And then at each point that I am, and I want to make sure that I've got that with the iron spot. Yep. that I didn't move the bottom side there. And so it's really almost like sewing a straight line, if you will, with your. And I'll keep moving that paper around and getting this one here. Make sure the curve is correct. And, you know, take it slow, take it easy. Move your fabric as you need to. And having that paper out of your way just helps, you know, with the manipulation of your fabric as you're sewing your pieces together. And, you know, if you want to put more pins in to make sure that, you know, that stays where you want it to, feel free to do that. Glue it, all those things that one does. And, okay. And I will press that down toward the arc. All right. And get that in. And then the next piece would be this piece. And then finally you would do your A piece. And you would have your block. And seriously, you find the center here, and then for this one, the center here, and putting your pieced part, you know, the larger part to the bottom, and keep that at the top, and do that just as I did all the way down. Let me check the questions. Please remind me of the size of the block. They're 8-inch blocks. Says 8-inch finish. That is correct. The Tim Holtz fabrics I'm just so excited about, and I had to do this. Using a rotary. Okay, we got that. All right, so that would finish block 1. Now I want to take just a minute to talk about block 2. I have done some prep work here. I have cut my fabrics. And again, you'll need to take the F, put it, you know, in the center before you know, cut that out. And I taped it up so that it would be ready to go for that piece of fabric. I, you know, copied off my A and my C piece and my B number 2, and I have my fabrics for all of the spikes. And I have my paper ready to go. Again, the first piece is straight up, and you can see that these are very thin. And they'll come out beautifully every time with that. So, you know, they get thinner here, a little bit wider, thinner. So you're going to be measuring different widths. The length is pretty much the same, but different widths in that, and remember that angle. So, you know, you're going to need to either do a large rectangle and, you know, slice it on the diagonal in half. I just leave them open because I can use those other pieces at other times for, you know, different parts of the paper piecing. So you can do it either way. But this is block number 2. How it's going to look. It's a little, you know, it's got, you know, a bunch of curves in it. This is one solid piece of fabric, so that's going to change the look of it when you put it in the quilt. And someone also asked in the questions, you know, how do we go about the design process or whatever? And the design process for me is I just make a number of these copies, you know, 4 or 5 of each of the front page copy, and then I start on my design wall and start laying them out to see what I might like to do. On occasion, because I also play around with my watercolors or crayons, colored pencils, whatever, and I'll put in, some color so I can kind of see what I might do with it and how I want to put it together. If you have other thoughts or ideas on that, I would love to hear about that. So for next week, finish block A, getting those points together, putting your curves in, and then start on block 2. Ask me the questions. And if you have pictures of block 1 done, please put them up on, it's on the screen. I want to point to my screen, but you can't see if I point. It says D Saturday Sampler, hashtag D Saturday Sampler. Put them there, put them on the forum, email them to me, and I'll put them up next week. Again, if you have questions that you feel more comfortable emailing to me, my email address is there, or please put them on the forum or on the YouTube replay site. Is it cut out as one piece? If you're referring to this on the F, yes it is. It's cut out as one large piece. All right? And my email is on the screen. Is so outside of my usual comfort zone, it feels exotic to me. Oh, I love it, Sherry. Go exotic. Be wow. Be gorgeous. All right, I think I've got the questions right now. If you need any other questions, any other help, we'll do that, and we'll be back next week. And coming up, because a number of you have mentioned it to me, and other places, into private emails, etc., that you like the freezer paper method of paper piecing, and I will share that. I'm going to, but at first I want to get the regular paper piecing out of the way, and then we can experiment with other things and a little bit more with design. But today I wanted to help you get started on sewing those curves. I believe I sewed the most difficult one simply because it's so narrow, and it ends up being an inch, and so as it's cut, and then it fits into your block, and it's a gorgeous block, and the rest of them hopefully will go just as easily for you. But again, questions, put it up on the forums, send your pictures, hashtag them onto Instagram, and we'll see that. And have a wonderful Mother's Day. It's going to be a beautiful one here. I hope it is where you are, and that you get to spend some quality time with your children or with rest and just relaxation. So happy Mother's Day, and we'll see you next week. Blessings.